Where part one was all about tension quietly building, part two is where that emotional tension begins to surface. It's still told with grace and subtlety, but the characters now face decisions, real, emotional, messy, and deeply human. This chapter is not about scandal or explicit betrayal. It's about the moment someone realizes they're standing at a crossroads. And both paths come with loss. The story is not just about falling for someone new. It's about falling away from someone you used to love, and the heartbreak of realizing that love may no longer be enough to hold a life together. The morning after awareness sets eye on the story opens the morning after. Grace shared an emotionally charged moment in the rain with Thomas, the young gardener. Nothing physical happened. But something far more powerful did. Emotional acknowledgement. As Grace wakes up the next morning, the weight of her feelings presses in. She realizes she's no longer in neutral territory. That look in the rain, the silence, the nearness sit was a crossing of a line, not in action, but in intention. And now her inner world has changed. She's not someone passively living a quiet life anymore. She's aware of the ache, and she can't unfeel what she felt. With Thomas, this is an incredibly important emotional beat. For many people who find themselves emotionally drawn to someone outside their relationship. This morning after moment is when the real struggle begins, not with the other person, but within themselves. A conversation with Thomas. The heart sbaks when Grace meets Thomas again. She's no longer hiding behind small talk. Her question is direct. Have you ever wanted something you knew you shouldn't? This question is both innocent and loaded. On the surface, it's vague, but emotionally, it's very clear. She's not just asking about temptation. She's asking about desire versus values. Feeling versus responsibility. Thomas's response is simple but mature. You decide what kind of person you want to be. This line grounds the story. It reminds us that feelings are not always a choice, but actions are. It's a moral line drawn gently. He acknowledges the emotion, but doesn't rush into it. And yet, the fact that they're having this conversation shows how deeply this connection is affecting them both. This is what makes their relationship feel so real and powerful. It's not lust-driven or impulsive. It's emotionally honest, full of restraint, self-awareness, and fear of the consequences. They're not trying to destroy anyone's life. They're trying to understand what their hearts are trying to tell them. The unseen fire growing. ATTRACTON. The days pass. Grace and Thomas's connection continues to grow, but now it's not innocent anymore. There's a mutual awareness of the feelings between them. The air is charged. The conversations carry a weight, and small gestures, a glance, a brush of fingers, a long pause, now mean more than words. This emotional intensity is important. It shows how intimacy isn't always about physical contacts. Sometimes it's built in moments of silence and unspoken feelings. The tension between them reflects not recklessness, but something more dangerous. Hope. Hope for something better, more alive, more truthful. But both Grace and Thomas still hold back. They're not making confessions or declarations. They're both trying to stay grounded, but the current pulling them together is growing stronger with each interaction. David returns the marriage in the Mayara. Then comes the shift. David returns early from his trip. This moment is like a cold splash of reality. Grace is caught off guard not because of guilt about something she did, but because she's suddenly face to face with the life she's been emotionally drifting away from. David is tired, distracted, and affectionate, but it feels off. The warmth he gives her now feels practiced, like muscle memory. Grace, standing beside him, realizes she's changed. The woman he left days ago is no longer the same. She's tasted something honest, something real, something alive. This is a crucial point in the emotional arc. Grace is not cruel. She's not throwing herself into the arms of another man while her husband sleeps. Instead, she's emotionally torn. Trying to reconcile the life she built with the truth, her heart is now whispering louder every day. You're not happy. You haven't been for a long time. The emotional disconnect between Grace and David becomes painfully obvious. David may still love her, but he doesn't see her not in the way she needs to be seen. And worse, he doesn't even notice the emotional shift in her. He's content with the surface. But Grace can no longer live at the surface. The private moment, a gentle, unforgettable Sayoanand. Then comes the moment everything turns. That evening, Grace steps into the garden. It's dark, peaceful, the stars are above. The world is quiet, and Thomas is there. There's no dramatic buildup. It's just two people standing in the same place where something had started to grow emotionally and symbolically. The garden is blooming again, just like Grace's feelings. They don't rush toward each other. They speak softly. I never wanted to be the reason your world falls apart, Thomas says. This line reveals his struggle. He cares deeply for Grace, but he doesn't want to be a homewrecker. He's not chasing a fantasy. He's falling for a real woman, with real consequences. And Grace replies, maybe my world is already changing. This line is powerful. It's not an admission of betrayal, it's an admission of truth. The change is already happening, not because of Thomas, but because of everything her life has become before him. Thomas is not the cause. He's the mirror. And then it happens. They hold hands. It's a small, intimate gesture. But in the context of their story, it carries the emotional weight of 1,000 unspoken confessions. There's no kiss, no touch beyond that. Just a hands meeting in the dark, full of quiet emotion, connection, fear, longing, and tenderness. This is the private moment that changes everything. Not because it's a scandal, but because it's true. Grace finally lets herself feel what she's been holding back. The decision, what will she do? The story ends not with resolution, but with questions. Grace must now face the truth. Can she return to her marriage knowing she's already emotionally left it? Is her connection with Thomas real enough to risk everything for? Is it possible to find herself again? If so, what will she have to lose to do it? This is where the emotional weight of the story lands hardest. Infidelity here isn't a moment of betrayal. It's the slow death of emotional closeness that made her open to someone else's presence in the first place. It's easy to judge people from the outside. But inside a quiet marriage, inside a woman who has been emotionally alone for years, a touch of understanding can feel like a lifeline. The story closes without telling the audience what Grace chooses. That's intentional. Because this isn't just Grace's story, it's everyone's story. Everyone who's ever asked. The first part of this story introduces us to a deeply emotional and relatable theme: a woman slowly losing herself in a life that looks perfect on the outside, but feels quietly empty on the inside. This story is not about dramatic betrayal or sudden scandal. It's about slow-burning emotional disconnect, the kind that builds up unnoticed until one unexpected encounter shakes everything loose. We follow Grace, a protagonist, through a chapter of her life that feels quietly heartbreaking and intimately real, marked by emotional loneliness, unmet desires, and the longing to be truly seen. The story sets the tone for mature audiences with gentle pacing, emotional detail, and romantic undertones that feel authentic and human. Grace, a woman at a CROSSROA de Grace, is a 38-year-old woman living in New Hampshire, in a beautiful colonial-style home that many would envy. But this home, once a symbol of comfort and stability, has become more of a shell. She's been married to David, a successful architect, for 15 years. Outwardly, they have what looks like a picture-perfect life: financial security, a large home, and a long-term relationship. But emotionally, Grace is starved for connection. The first subtle clue of her dissatisfaction comes through the garden. It used to be her sanctuary, a place where she found joy. Now it's dry, neglected, overgrown, a visual metaphor for her inner life. Her dreams and passions, like the flowers she once tended, have wilted. This creates an emotional foundation for the story. We begin to see how emotional disconnection, routine, and years of being taken for granted can push even the most devoted partner to yearn for something different. Not just someone, but something that reminds them of who they used to be. Thomas, the unexpected gardener and a renter. Thomas, a 29-year-old gardener David hires to restore the yard. He arrives quietly, respectfully, and without fanfare. Thomas is written as gentle but grounded, someone who feels more connected to the earth and to himself than most people Grace knows. He is not the typical romantic fantasy. He's not flashy or overtly seductive, but he listens. And that, in Grace's life, is a rarity. Their relationship begins with awkward politeness. He calls her ma'am, and she gently corrects him. This small detail shows Grace trying to close a gap, not just between their ages, but between how she sees herself and how the world now sees her. She doesn't feel like a ma'am. She feels young inside, unfulfilled, still full of unspoken dreams. As Thomas works on the garden, Grace begins coming outside, more often offering lemonade, starting small conversations. These innocent interactions slowly begin to carry emotional weight. She's drawn to his presence, not his appearance. She is pulled toward the way he seems to see her, not as someone's wife, not as a forgotten partner, but as Grace. The symbolism of the Garden in this story is not just a setting, it's a symbol for Grace's emotional state. As Thomas brings new life into the soil, planting tulips and clearing away dead roots, it mirrors the way he unintentionally begins stirring up Grace's buried feelings and forgotten desires. She begins to remember what it felt like to care about something, to feel alive in the smallest moments. The flowers blooming outside become a quiet contrast to the stagnant silence in her marriage. David, a husband, David. Grace's husband is not written as cruel or abusive, as absent. He's a man focused on work, traveling often, and emotionally unaware of how far away he's grown from his wife. His phone calls are brief, practical. He doesn't ask how she is. He doesn't notice the change in her voice or the pause in her responses. This lack of awareness deepens Grace's loneliness. Starts to realize it's not the distance that hurts, it's the indifference. This portrayal is important. It avoids turning David into a villain and instead focuses on something much more real. How marriages can quietly drift apart without anyone screaming or slamming doors. Sometimes it's not one big moment that ends a connection, it's years of little silences. The rain scene, a moment of charged May, one of the most emotionally intense moments in part 1, happens during a rainstorm. Grace rushes outside with a towel, calling out to Thomas, trying to protect him from the weather. This small act of care reflects her emotional investment. It's instinctive, real. They both stand there in the rain, wet and speechless. It's the way their eyes meet carries a kind of unspoken intimacy, not sexual, but emotional. Something stirs between them and they both feel it. Neither of them says it out loud, but the energy shifts. Grace is the one to break the moment. She steps back and says she should go inside. She still recognizes the emotional boundary she shouldn't cross, but the line has been seen now. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. The most haunting truth, she didn't miss Ikem that night. When David calls to say he won't be coming home, Grace's reaction becomes the quiet turning point of part 1. She doesn't cry, she doesn't even feel surprised. Instead, she feels nothing. And it's this emptiness that shocks her. This is the first time Grace confronts the deeper truth. It's not that she's lonely because David is gone. She's lonely even when he's there. This moment is deeply relatable to anyone who's ever felt alone inside a relationship. It's not the physical absence that hurts the most, it's the emotional absence. And this is where the story ends, part 1, not on a dramatic cliffhanger, but on a quiet emotional reckoning. A feeling that something deep inside Grace has shifted forever, even though she hasn't acted on it yet. Themes in Part 1. Let's take a deeper look at the emotional and romantic themes at work here. 1. Emotional infidelity, although nothing physical happens in Part 1. This is a clear story of emotional infidelity. Grace begins to connect to another man on a level that feels more personal than the one she shares with her husband. She finds understanding, warmth, and presence in Thomas, and those are the very things missing from her marriage too. Longing and rediscovery. Grace is not just longing for romance, she's longing for herself. Through her interactions with Thomas, she begins to remember the parts of herself she lost over the years: her passion for art, her love for gardening, her desire to be emotionally seen. 3. Subtle tension. This story relies on emotional tension rather than action. Nothing inappropriate is said or done, but the weight of unspoken feelings makes the story incredibly rich. The tension lies in eye contact, small touches, awkward silence is all, handled with maturity and grace. 4. Romantic ideal versus reality. We represent something new, something emotionally alive. Oh, yeah. David represents familiarity, commitment, and shared history. Part 1 sets the stage for this emotional dilemma. Grace follow her longing or honor her past. Why the story are so innate. This story is not about scandal, it's about the silent pain many feel but don't know how to talk about. It reflects the emotional challenges faced in many long-term relationships, especially when one partner becomes disconnected and the other feels invisible. People often relate to Grace because she is not reckless or impulsive. She is kind, gentle, and loyal, but she's also human. And like many humans, she yearns for warmth, connection, and to be remembered not as a wife or homemaker, but as a woman with dreams and feelings of her own. Setting up Part 2, Part 1 ends just before the line is crossed. That makes it the perfect setup for Part 2. It lays down emotional depth and complexity. Without rushing into cliché or drama, it asks the audience the central emotional question: what happens when you feel more alive with a stranger than with the person you promised your life to? Final THOUGHT sin summary. Part 1 of A Private Moment with the Gardener That Changed Everything is an emotionally rich, slow-building romantic drama that focuses on the quiet unraveling of a long-term marriage, the subtle and powerful energy of emotional intimacy, the rediscovery of self through unexpected connection. It doesn't over-explain, simply lets emotion, setting, and silence speak volumes, just like real life often does.